Today we are here to spend 45 minutes learning about StreamAlive and sharing feedbacks. So this particular community, this meeting innovation community, is all about finding ways to cross the knowing doing gap. There are great ways of leading meetings, but they rarely actually happen in practice. So what can we do in terms of technology? What can we do in terms of practice? What can we do in our organizations to make meetings successful on an everyday basis, make that easy? And exploring new technologies is part of that. So today, hopefully, we will get to understand what StreamAlive does. We'll get some ideas about how and when one might use it and get some feedback to this team that's early on their journey of finding their way to better meetings. For those of you who are humans on the call, oh my gosh, what an interesting multi-species event we are running here. For the humans, if you would open your feedback form now so that in case you have to go early or something happens, you are ready to give some feedback to this team and all of us running events here at the MIC about your experience. And with that, I am thrilled to welcome you, Lux. It's your stage. And am I saying your name correctly?
Absolutely, yes. Perfect.
Fabulous.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting us and for having me over here. It's a pleasure to meet you and your community. I've been going through the community, and it's just amazing and heartening to know that there's an entire community dedicated to making meetings better, because it fills up so much of our awake lives that it's a shame that we don't spend enough time making it better, and there's so much of room for improvement. So totally relate to the ethos with which you started what you do. And I love the fact that what we do aligns so beautifully with it. And hopefully you'll see why we're so excited as we go through this. I wouldn't call it a demo. It's more of a conversation. So, around what StreamAlive does. I'm ready to kick it off. I've actually got StreamAlive to join the meeting, and if required, I can show people how that's done down the line. But I thought sometimes it's best to just jump into the deep end. So let's actually dive in and look at StreamAlive in action. And a request to everyone in the room, the humans, not the bots, if you can be as participative as possible, because that's really what makes StreamAlive active. So keep your fingers on the trigger in terms of being ready with typing out in the chat. I'm going to be asking you to do things, and hopefully you'll see a different level of interaction than one typically does in meetings. I'm just going to start by sharing my screen. And all right. It starts off with the story of a book. And to quote Dickens, it started off around the middle of 2020, right in the middle of COVID, which was, the best of times in some ways, the worst of times in a lot of ways. And personally, for me, it was for various reasons, including a family emergency, a time when I took a break in the middle of 2020. Prior to that, I was a founder at a company called Unmetric. So very quickly, it's Lux Narayan. All my friends call me Lux, so please call me Lux. And I'm the CEO and a co-founder at StreamAlive. So like I was saying, I was previously a co-founder at a company called Unmetric, got acquired in the end of 2019, took a break in the middle of 2020 due to a family health emergency that had happened at the time, and used that time to engage in a pet project that had been in my head for a very long time, a fable called Name, Place, Animal, Thing. The reason I shamelessly plug my book here is because I didn't know the first thing about writing a book or editing a book or marketing a book. Now, you might read the book and say he still doesn't know the first thing about writing a book or editing a book. Let's keep that aside, yeah? I binged on a bunch of classes in the end of 2020 on exactly these things. How do you write a book? How do you edit a book? How do you get Jeff Bezos and the people at Amazon to bless your book and make sure it's up there in the listings and things like that? And these were, not surprisingly, delivered over Zoom, over Google Meet, over YouTube Live, and over Facebook Live. Half a dozen courses: Seth Godin's podcasting course, David Perel's Rite of Passage course, Scribe Book School's book writing course, and many other courses that I can't remember the names of. But 6 classes that I paid for that were delivered over 56 live streams. And the beautiful thing about that is In one, you hopefully learn how to write a book in some ways. But two, you see patterns. And over the course of 6 weeks, I saw so many fantastic patterns where in the case of the YouTube sessions, the chat would just fly by faster than the eye can see. I mean, it was like an ophthalmologist's nightmare. You're looking up and down like this. And then you had the Zoom sessions and the Facebook Live sessions and others where the presenter would enthusiastically say, hey, where are all of you joining from? And people would enthusiastically respond only to be ignored. Maybe 2 people would be called out and acknowledged, and the remaining 98 people would be ignored, which to me didn't feel right. It would be pretty rude of me, at least, to ask you a question and then ignore your answer altogether. So we don't do that in one-to-one conversations, but we do it in one-to-many conversations because we don't have a better solution. So let me kick it off by showing you how StreamAlive would address something like that, right? So I'd love to know where all of you are joining from. And here's the most beautiful part, in my opinion, my very biased opinion about what we do. Instead of asking you to go to a product, we brought the product into the room. So I'm going to request all of you to type, like humans do, in the chat as to where you're joining from. And as you type, I mean, Tina's in Newark, that's fantastic. Everybody else, if you can just type in the Zoom chat itself, and that's the most beautiful thing about the platform, just go to the Zoom chat and say hi from whichever city you are in or where you are, or okay, we've got Elise in Portland. We've got a couple of people on the East Coast, and this is a good opportunity for me to kind of zoom in and pan and zoom and look at where people are joining from and say that, oh, we got Tina from Newark, we got John from Washington, DC. But you see it, I mean, suddenly the world is literally lighting up like a Christmas tree, marking everyone's presence. And StreamAlive does this in real time. And by the way, all of you are being very, very kind to StreamAlive, but actually just typing your locations. Even if you were to type something like hi from X, and go ahead and try it if you'd like, I'm in this place, or I live in XYZ city. I've allowed you to have multiple answers. So you can pretend to be from a country you're not in. So someone is or pretending to be in Helsinki. Okay, Tina is pretending to be in Helsinki. I know that for a fact. And John, hopefully you're in Tunis. But if not, hopefully you get there sometime soon. But you get it. It's so beautiful when people talk as people do, and we are able to map them out here, put them in different locations. At least you're all over the place. I mean, you're in Portland, you're in Nairobi, you're everywhere. I mean, you're omnipresent, right? But you can imagine for a presenter, this is beautiful. And in our opinion, there's something powerful that happens. Tell people, I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you. It's as simple as that. As opposed to the current practice, which is, unfortunately, I'm going to ignore you, right? So yeah, we've got that map coming alive, and again,
welcome, Sarah. Put where you are in the chat.
Yeah, just type it in the chat, Sarah.
And anywhere. I mean, you too, Stephen.
Yes, please.
Oh, and it looks like Marta's joining. Angus Burnett was trying to join, and he apparently tried to join 97 times. It was the weirdest thing ever.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
must be having internet issues.
The Zoom gods were not his friend today. So
I like what Tina just did there. So, sorry, go on, Elise. You're saying.
No, that's all right. Go ahead,
I was saying
please.
that Tina just said Peru next, and what StreamAlive does at that point is just looks at Peru. So at this point, the application is in a very geographical frame of mind, for lack of a better term, and listening for anything that looks like a geo. And thank you. You folks are amazing. I mean, you're all over the place, but you're amazing. It's beautiful. Right. And by the way, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer. And that gives me a great opportunity to demo another feature of StreamAlive very, very soon. So people use this map as an icebreaker. They use it to have conversations. One of my favorite cities, at least Berlin. So yeah, there are people everywhere. Got a lot of people here. You can pan and zoom, and it's going to create clusters based on people from depending on where they're coming in from. John's in DC, Tina's in Newark, Stephen's in Boston. Hey, Stephen. Super. Awesome. So as you see, the most powerful thing is you don't have to leave the room. We didn't have to break eye contact. We were still talking. You're in the Zoom room, and the product is doing the heavy lifting. Right? Now we're going to get serious. Okay, it's quizzing time. So for all of you who are trivia fans, I'm going to ask you an investment question. And I'm going to put on my best Who Wants to Be a Millionaire voice. So Apple's first VC investment, venture capital investment, was in one of these 4 companies. So if you think that the correct answer is Google, please just type the number 1 in the chat. Or if you want to type a lot, you can just type the entire word Google, but the number 1 is more than enough. If you think it's PowerPoint, type the number 2 in the chat. So go ahead, folks. I mean, that's a good guess, TSMC. I'm not going to tell you if it's right or wrong. So we got people for Google, we got people for TSMC, no takers for PowerPoint, Blockbuster. I'm going to give you another 10 seconds, folks. And then so I've got a timer going on here. Those of you who've not given an answer, you have about 3 seconds more. Okay, someone changed their mind. So the TSMC has gone to 0. We got Blockbuster Video. And all right, we got votes for everything except PowerPoint, which is a shame because the correct answer is ding, PowerPoint, right? And the reason I brought that up is one, to demo how we do polls in a very, very different way, where I literally pretended to be a commentator at a horse race where I was talking about those polls dancing against each other. But it's fascinating, isn't it? It's been 38 years since PowerPoint was invented. And we're still talking. We're not listening. So our philosophy is very simple. I mean, PowerPoint was built for presenters. StreamAlive is built for audiences. And that's why we call ourselves an audience engagement platform for slide streamers, live events, live shows, online events, and everything in between to make them come alive, like hopefully you've been seeing in this session so far, right? I'd love to make sure I address, I'm grateful for all of you who joined for, carving out a slice of your day today. So I want to make sure I address what you hope to see. So if you don't mind, by the way, we have this penchant for alliteration. So all our features are alliterations, magic maps, which you saw first, and then power polls. And now we're on transient thoughts. So everybody, Elise, maybe you can kick it off. Tell us why you're at this session today. I mean, why are you so gracefully giving me these 45 minutes of your life today?
In chat or in
the
out
chat.
loud? In the
Everything's
chat,
in the
of course.
chat. Yes, please. We're gonna pretend that we're gonna have cacophony if everyone speaks it out loud. If you have hundreds of people speaking, so in the chat, absolutely, yes, please. So this is a feature called Transient Thoughts. And there we are, right? So it's literally like me peeking into your minds as you're giving different answers, that absolutely, Elise. So I'm very curious about what's possible from the chat. There's a lot possible from the chat. Like right now, this is like almost like an ethereal looking at what people are typing. So it's going to wait till we get more responses. And again, just imagine a lot of people typing answers out there. And those populating over here in the chat. Stephen, Tina, Marta, please go ahead. Sarah, type any of the answers you have on what you hope to accomplish today, and we'll try and address all of those things. Right? So you're going to keep this going. So maybe just do this for another 5 to 6 seconds. When is this not a good idea? When is it fascinating? Absolutely. That's exactly what we were built for a globally dispersed company, because start with the maps, acknowledge where people are from, and get everyone to have a voice. Actually, if you think of it, it's nothing new, because we've always had in a physical room a situation where you ask people to raise their hands, and then you say, oh, 2/3 of the room actually agrees with me. With chat, you have so much more than a binary raising and dropping of the hands, and why not use it in very interesting ways? So. Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are so many people who, at least about marketers, so many people who sign up for webinars and never land up because the recording is exactly the same as the live event. Right? Oh, the mic is a fantastic community. Thank you for inviting us here. And we hope to be a big part of it going forward. So again, it absolutely works with Microsoft Teams as well. It works natively with YouTube Live, Teams, and Zoom. And right now, my very talented colleagues in our dev team are building it out for Google Meet. Let's assume I want to stop this interaction. I can stop here and look at all the answers here. And by the way, you will see at the end of it, we can look into the analytics, and we'll get some pretty robust analytics on everything that happened. And we'll go through that as well. Reason we exist is because I think what I've done all my life is presenting for a living. And between now and this time tomorrow, 100 million people will do exactly that. Teachers, preachers, sellers, entertainers, live streamers, slide streamers, every shape, size, flavor, in every digital and physical room will be presenting to, unfortunately, a lot of disengaged audiences for all the reasons that we just talked about a little while back. Our formula for changing that is actually pretty simple. But before diving in there, since all of you are experts in meetings and pretty vested in the world of making meetings better, I'd love to know what you currently use in one or two words, if you don't mind. Tools or techniques or things that you use to make your meetings, your all hands, your webinars, your sessions a lot more engaging. It can be a product, it can be a technique, breakout sessions, absolutely. Small groups, yes, and breakout sessions. Yes, please, would love some more feedback on any tools you use, any features you use. Physical movement, absolutely. I mean, it's so underrated in my opinion. Totally agree on physical movements. Polls are totally table stakes and something that we should be having in every session. Have people answer in the chat. So as you can see, some of these things break up, as in so this is great for things where the answers are in one or two words. Miro is a fantastic product for virtual whiteboarding. ChatGPT. Oh, okay. I'm glad someone mentioned ChatGPT because we've got a little surprise for you on what we want to do on ChatGPT. So we'll look at that in a little bit as well. Right. But this is a great way to get people's opinions on things. And I think I have a photograph here. I'm just going to switch tracks here. This is an event called the Thai Global Summit, where there was a speaker on stage, and we asked people in the audience as to what they thought about the speaker. And as they were putting in a virtual chat that StreamAlive created for the in-person event, because obviously they're not on Zoom, so we actually created a chat that they could participate through their phones on. So the audience was actually having a conversation while the speaker was presenting, saying, oh, this is amazing. And when they gave their opinions, it populated a real-time word cloud in the background that was beautiful for everyone to see. I always have a task with jumping between my windows, and hopefully we'll get it right this time. A second, please. There we are, right? The way StreamAlive, as you've seen so far, helps make presentations and increase engagement is really very simple. We help the presenter become a performer, and the way to do that is make the audience participants, right? Make the presentation a conversation. Allow the presenter to riff with the audience instead of talk with them instead of talking at them. And on an average, when StreamAlive is used, we see that engagement goes up about 10.3 times. It's really very simple. I mean, acknowledge people, have a conversation, keep it human, and it's really, at least what you said, physical movement, all those things are part of being human. But we lose a lot of that humanity when we get into meetings, and we're trying to bring that back. Very quickly, and since you're a community that's invested so much in meetings, I think you'll enjoy this. There are 4 parts to the platform. Plan is what I did before this meeting together, put together this, what we call run-off show for you today, which is a combination of slides and interactions. The second part is track engagement, and we'll see that in a second. Increase engagement, as we've been doing so far through all the interactions, and finally analyze engagement, and we'll do that as well. So I'm going to keep switching tabs over here to just show you a bunch of things that hopefully are very exciting, right? So planning engagement, I'm taking you currently through this run-off show here, but I said, okay, I'm going to show a picture of the book. I'm going to ask people where they're joining from. Then I'm going to ask them a question, then show them the answer, that it's PowerPoint, and so on and so forth. This is the run-off show that I'm taking you through over here, right? Now, let's say I wanted some help with an interaction. Let's say I wanted to run a poll over here. Someone said ChatGPT in the chat a little while back. So maybe let's take some help from ChatGPT saying, hey, ChatGPT, give me suggestions for a meeting. Here's where it gets really meta, right? On meeting professionals. Right. I think ChatGPT is going to explode at this point because we're kind of getting it into full self-referential mode where you're asking it for suggestions for meetings. Okay, what challenges have you faced in meeting planning? These are interesting questions. So that's the other thing with the run-off show. You can think up your own questions, or you can get help from GPT-3 in this case and say, okay, that's an interesting question. I want to put that into my poll, and boom, it's a part of your run-off show. Right? I'm not going to put it as part of my run-off show because that is a demo, but you get the idea. That's the first part, planning for engagement. Second part is tracking engagement. Since StreamAlive is active in the chat, it has been reading everything that we've been typing so far in the chat with some very, very articulated purposes. The first is this. We typed a lot of things from Berlin to Finland to Peru to whatever, but those were not questions. Anything that is a question in the chat is automatically identified by StreamAlive's algorithms as being a question. So you don't need someone to copy it from the chat, paste it in there. I mean, imagine how much more productive a meeting can be if you just tell people, hey, put your questions in the chat. It trips me up every time I attend a Zoom webinar where people put their questions in the chat and then they're yelled at and told, don't put your questions in the chat, put them in the Q&A in the questions tab. Chat is not for questions. I mean, I wouldn't meet you, John, in a public place and you start talking about your family and I say, hey, John, sorry, we're not going to talk family here. We're going to talk family in this room. We're going to talk work in this room and we're talking about sports in that room. We don't compartmentalize our conversations in the physical world. Why do we do it in the digital world, right? So just ask people to put it in the chat and we can put that in. I'm not going to answer about whether Hogwarts is here, but Venice is not a good idea. Does it work with teams? We talked about it. What if I share naughty words? Great question. When you do an interaction, so for example, if I do a word cloud, I have a profanity filter. Of course, if you're especially creative with your profanity and your naughty words, you might be able to get around it, but most common words would be picked up in most common languages. So there is a profanity filter and things like that that you can save for those. Increasing interactions, which is really the third part of the workflow, is very, very simple. Ask people questions, acknowledge their answers, keep it fun, keep it interesting. So for example, we have all these features. We went through some of them, the maps, the polls, the word cloud, the transient thoughts. And now I'm going to show you choice circle, which is what happens when I have a lot to talk about, but we don't have the time. So I could tell you that, folks, these are the next 4 features we're building. And I'm sure you have better things to do than to listen to me talk about all 4. So how about this? We make a deal. I'm going to spin this wheel and we're going to talk for a minute about the one feature that it ends up on. So imagine, we've had presenters say, let's decide who's going to come on stage next. Let's spin a name and then you put all of the, we got confetti as well. So because you have to, right? So if this was a bunch of people whose teams, we were calling on, you have a professor in a college who actually uses this to decide who presents next in a case study competition. So imagine that this team is over and then you say, okay, this one is over, and it's finally there are 2. And obviously if you have just one, you're not going to spin it anymore because you know who's coming in, but things like that. A lot of things we're building to make it fun. Group games, by the way, is like Wordle and anagrams and things like that. Imagine having a jumbled up version of meetings, and the first person who types the word correctly as meetings gets confetti thrown at them digitally over here, stuff like that. John, you had a question. Go for it, please.
I'm looking at this spinning wheel, and I'm wondering if there's some sort of feature where it could grab the participants and automatically put them on the wheel, so you could do like a go around based on who's here, a random go around.
My good sir, you thank you for that, first of all, because it's great when we hear someone. You can see Tina, my co-founder, nodding her head because absolutely. So first, absolutely. This feature that I'm showing you now is called Choice Circle, and in keeping with our penchant for alliterations, what we're working on right now in our labs is a feature called Winning Wheel, which will, in its first version, take any person who till this point of time has put at least one comment in the chat. So your lottery ticket is putting at least one comment in the chat. Everybody in this room qualifies because you folks are so awesome. But imagine then after that, John, your name and Elise and Tina and everybody and Sarah and everyone's name out here and a wheel being spun with their names. And then it ends on one of them who gets confetti and maybe some swag as well. A second iteration of that is going to be filter based, where we might say anyone who's said Elise is awesome in the chat will get their name put into the wheel. If you've not said Elise is awesome, you don't get your name put into the wheel. So you can ask people to put a certain string just to reiterate a lesson or something that you want them to take away. And then that becomes a qualifying criterion. But is that how you were thinking of it, John?
Yeah, I was thinking that you were talking about using it to randomly select speakers at a conference, for example, where you pre-knew who those people were. but in a random audience of people who showed up to this meeting, like who's really here, like who's in this Zoom session with their camera on. They're probably people who are engaged. Like, so selection criteria to auto-generate the categories and then use that for different interactions, like selecting somebody to give their next status update. Or we're trying to have everybody introduce themselves. We want to make sure everybody gets through, but we don't know the order. So we use something that helps us make that order and something. So that's what I was thinking. Some things like that.
Oh, it totally makes sense. And I think that's a great idea in terms of criterion, like do they have a camera on or not and stuff. That would be great as well.
And various criterion, exactly.
Thank you. Absolutely. Stephen, did you have a question? I see your hand up.
Yes, it's along the same lines of, I mean, I've often thought of that yes, if there was a hat with, pieces of paper, you could pull it out and it wouldn't be, that way you wouldn't be favoring any particular group. It would be totally random and people could see that as, so the wheel appeals to me in that sense. But if, for instance, if you look at it now, it's a 25% chance that, that it will land on any particular one, which would be great if there were 4 groups of questions, for instance, or comments that were all exactly 25%. But for instance, it would be nice, I would say, if for instance, 50% was of one category. So instead of 4 equal ones like that, you could have, it could reflect, the pie pieces could reflect the questions or comments. Do you see what I mean? So if 50% of people wanted to talk about a particular topic or had a comment, then it would show as 50%, and it would reflect the fact that 50% of the people wanted to, so it would be weighted. It wouldn't be, according to people's interests. So anyway, just a thought. But the idea is making it impartial so that, so if you're the only one who has one question, it shows this tiny little sliver, but at least you'd have a chance to be picked or,
Yeah.
So go ahead. Thank you.
I think that makes a lot of sense too. And because once we jump to winning wheel, the input variables can be different. And I think it's a great idea to have questions as an input variable where these questions could then feed into the wheel and you spin it. And it is in theory possible to pull out thematic commonalities to them and therefore say that these 5 questions are about Zoom or these 3 questions are about interactions, and then have that feed into the wheel. And I think that absolutely makes sense as well. So look forward to showing you that in the months to come. Thank you for that. But I think something common to what all of us are saying is that it's if you're looking for the secret to great engagement, it's exactly what it shows here, which is tell people that I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you, and it's as simple as that. Last part, can analyze engagement, and here's where I start to get a little ambitious, where I'm going to try and my colleagues in the dev team will probably hate me for this because they warned us against doing analytics for a live event, but let's see what happens. So we've got our meeting innovation community, and if I were to analyze this, we've got 53 comments by 5 people so far, 2 comments per minute. Elise, you win the prize for maximum number of comments. Thank you so much. We can look at who participated for each of those questions, look at what kind of responses we got. We can replay the results. We can see where all of us are from or pretending to be from or hope to be at in that replay of the magic maps. You can use this in your socials to say, this is what our community said. This is how they answered different questions, responses people gave. And you don't have to look at it on platform after the meeting is over. Since this is my meeting, I'm going to get an automated email report that's like a mother of all Excel files that has all these details embedded within it. So what I'm getting at is that's a last part of it, which is a whole amount of analytics that helps you understand what happens. So plan, track, increase, and analyze. A lot of go for it, John.
Analyze. So that's interesting because I think the report is a factual. Sorry about that. There you go. The report is a factual conveyance of what happened, but it'd be interesting to understand integration with something like sentiment analysis for what happened in the meeting, or something like my favorite thing of the day, ChatGPT, kind of pulling out these salient results from the meeting by looking at what happened and somehow pulling up a higher analysis. Do you see some way for an evolution of that, or feeding stuff from this, what's happened here, this corpus of data you've collected, into something like that provides a higher level analysis?
Short answer, yes. And the reason I sound a little hesitant about it is because the longer answer is yes to a part of it. In terms of the sentiment part, yes. But sentiment is often biased. So like I mentioned, we were previously founders at a company called Unmetric in the social media benchmarking space, where sentiment was a big part of what we captured, saying, for example, telling United that the majority of tweets directed at them were a lot more negative than the average tweet directed at American Airlines, where there was a bias between positive and negative. But in most meetings, we find that the bias is a lot more towards positive, so it just veers towards a relative sentiment. And with GPT, we haven't tried it for this, but my guess is that for disconnected pieces of content from different people, it's going to find it difficult to thread them together, especially since a lot of them are contextual. At one point, suddenly it's locations. At one point, it is PowerPoint, Google, TSMC, and something. So it's just a little too haphazard is my guess, but I think it's worth a shot for us to check it out.
Maybe, yeah, right.
Okay.
Right, cool. Yeah, and also figuring out from there, and then I'll shut up, how people, people that were disengaged from the meeting, because not everybody engages. So maybe you have some sense of, who were the really active, vibrant participants and who were kind of passively there. And maybe that helps in some way. Anyway, things like that, analysis, I think is the next step, would be kind of an interesting thing from all this.
I think so, yes. There's a lot of directions you can take that in interesting ways, yeah. Speaking of interesting ways, we've been seeing a lot of interesting ways in which people have been using us. Dr. Ziu is part of the NHS, and he told us that we've transformed how we teach hematology to doctors. And then he yelled at us for not having slide numbers. So the 17 or 28 that you see in the bottom came because of Dr. Ziu. So we call it the Ziu feature over here. And we're almost at the end of things. This is great feedback from me. So as you can see, we call all our features, alliterative names. There's Magic Maths, Power Polls, Wonder Words, Choice Circle, Quick Questions. We've got a few upcoming features that I talked about, and we discussed, like the winning wheel. There's GPT-3 help, there's analytics. And this is a question where you can give multiple answers. I'd love to know from this group of meeting professionals, which of these you find useful. So if you can just separately answer, starting with your favorite one. So if you think it's Magic Maps, just type the number 1 in the chat. And then separately after that, type the number 5 in the chat if you think it's Quick Questions. But I just love to know which features people think they would use the most. Okay, that seems to be a lot more for the maps. And try circle, power polls. Yeah, you can never go wrong with polls, actually, because, and by the way, hopefully you're also seeing that the colors are different here. There's a fair amount of customization possible in terms of the colors and things, because nobody at Coca-Cola, for example, would use a chart like this, which is Pepsi blue, and nobody at Pepsi would use a chart like the previous one, which is Coca-Cola red. So colors are important. Interesting. The word cloud doesn't seem to have many takers over there. So that's,
well, you know what? I couldn't remember on the word cloud if that was the one where they come in like bubbles, or if it was the one where it was a word cloud, or if it's both.
Which is a great reminder to me. I forgot to add transient thoughts, which is the bubbles, and the word clouds are the symbols. Thank you. I knew I was missing something over here.
I was like, and I can't vote for upcoming features because,
Makes sense. Perfect. Thank you. This is great feedback for us. So, when my colleagues ask me, so which feature did they like the most? I mean, we don't have to take my word for it. I'm going to look at the analytics and show them that it is Wonder Words. Just to share what we're building, a lot of it right now is focused on building. If you can see at Q1 2023, we're focused on building it for Google Meet, and then for Twitch, we're working on hybrid events. Actually, the Zoom version of things where you're participating through the Zoom chat. But I could have put up a QR code and got you into a virtual chat on your phones, and that would have been equally exciting. Except in a Zoom chat, why would I want to do that when I can get you to participate from the chat itself? So it's actually a good segue for me to go into my platform and the fact that.
So wait, could you go back to that for real quick? So does that mean, because I know we have a couple people in this community who are big fans of asynchronous meetings. So does that mean that you could interact entirely through chat and not have an audiovisual real-time component?
You mean for a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting?
Just outside of an actual live meeting, like, is there a chat, like a Slack or a other kind of chat-based way where you don't have you're not talking at the same time, but you are using a text-based inquiry response mechanism to generate maps or whatever?
Not asynchronously at this point, because what happens is the moment I get into, say, the magic map thing, at that point, the application is in a geographical frame of mind. So it needs to be synchronous from that perspective. Although technically it is possible to make it asynchronous with the mobile chat that we have. We just said folks are probably going to have their asynchronous conversations on Slack and Teams and other platforms. So we decided not to try and reinvent the wheel on that one. So it's going to be only synchronously. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But just to comment on that part, I could have, for example, so we work on YouTube, we work on Teams, we work on Zoom, in-person or hybrid events. So let's say I was doing an in-person or a hybrid event, and I had done this for testing for you a little earlier over here. And I can say, okay, I'm going to take you through exactly the same run of show, except that in this case, if I'm going to kick it off, I'm going to ask people to interact by actually scanning a little QR code over here, and then you work on it on your phones and stuff. So that is the alternative method in which we could have done it. So the idea is, for any native platform, we make it integrate off the platform itself. But if it's not integrated, you can use a QR code or you can do it another way. So that's why if you go into StreamAlive, it says that these native integrations are coming soon for Google Meet and LinkedIn and Facebook. But you can use it using a QR code with any other platform that you want at this point. Looking if you have any other new questions. No, we don't. So I think we're good, but happy to, and I like to finish meetings a little ahead of time so we give people a little bit back of their lives in terms of what they allocated for this. So thank you, everyone. You folks have been awesome, and this has been great feedback. I'm at lux@streamalive.com, or hi@streamalive.com actually goes to Tina, me, and our other co-founder as well. Please keep all the feedback coming. And I forgot to mention, if you go to streamalive.com, there is a free version of the app. So if you have up to 30 people in the room, it's absolutely free for life. So please go ahead, use it, try it on your Zoom meetings, and most importantly, please give us feedback. We thrive on it, positive, negative, all of it. But looking forward to being very, very involved with the community. Happy to take any other questions, and thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you. So I have one more question for you for sure. In this community, we have, a bunch of people who don't show up to live events, but do watch recordings. As we put this up and we start to share what we've learned here, who are you most hoping will connect with what you're doing? Who would you love to have see this and go, you know what, I'm going to try this in my next event?
Let me answer the question with a video, if you don't mind. So this is a classic example. Oops, this is a different one. Sorry.
Hey, Ninjapreneur.
This video, I'm ashamed to say, it is better than any video that we produce internally at our team. But this is by a gentleman called Jan Keck, who's a virtual facilitator. So we've been seeing a lot of folks who are virtual facilitators, who are meeting professionals like yourselves, who have the unenviable task of making all hands, town halls, and all of those a lot more engaging. So we would love to hear from anyone really who is tasked with making meetings of more than 10 people engaging, which could be a town hall, an all hands, a virtual plus physical meeting, a webinar, because I think a webinar has a lot of things loaded against it. People's videos are off, their audio is off, they're only allowed to chat, and they're going to be yelled at when they put their questions in the chat. So there's a lot of negatives already at webinars. But this is kind of what we're hoping for. I'm just going to fast forward here to minute 5 of what Jan said here, because a lot of usage comes from someone hearing, at least you saw us in a meeting that I think Michael had used us for, Michael Lee.
Mhm.
And we're very grateful for that, because a lot of StreamAlive's usage comes from exposure, virality, from people seeing it and telling someone, hey, I found something cool. So Jan actually talked about this part. I'll just play 30 seconds of this.
Visible for everyone, and nobody feels left out right as the first thing in the meeting. And if you like to make it even more engaging, I want to introduce you to a pretty cool tool that I've been playing around with and having lots of fun with in the last week. I was originally recommended this by another virtual facilitation trainer, and it's called StreamAlive. First, I'm going to invite StreamAlive to my Zoom meeting, and this is kind of the thing that I love the most. This will make sure that no participant needs to install an app, click a link, leave Zoom at all.
That's the core of what we're doing, which is, make it inclusive for people, but make it frictionless when it's inclusive, right? In terms of, you don't have to click a link, you don't have to leave the room, you don't have to install an app. Right now, we tell people, yeah, I want to know what you had for breakfast, but do these browser gymnastics to answer that. And it's so complicated, right? So long answer to your question, Elise, is I can see some of you, I could see Marta nodding there. So people who felt that pain point by having it as something they've experienced so far, who see this as a refreshingly different way of doing it, because we're the only platform who works off native chat. I would love to get that feedback, saying how has that experience been different? And more importantly, how has it been for your people? Like last month, we had a CEO of a company use it for a town hall with about 1,800 people. And in the company's 30-year history, they had a maximum of 100 comments in every quarterly town hall. This time they had 7,500. Because they asked them questions like, hey, do you want us to continue to sponsor tennis things or soccer things or pickleball or yoga? Or what sport do you want us to do? And people you ask people, they'll tell you, right? So I just want to understand what the boundaries are there, what else people can use us for. So all feedback, yes.
Very cool. Stephen, did you have a question? You popped on.
Right. Lux was mentioning the increase in comments, and I was wondering if I would think that people would be reluctant to point out problems in a large organization if their identity was known. So was there a cloaking device for those comments? Because if it wasn't, you would get even more if you could be anonymous. Just like was that the case in that example you were telling us about?
Great question. Absolutely. So if you don't mind just scanning this QR code for a second, it'll answer your question. This is what they used in that session where they had an in-person plus a hybrid thing. Since we are StreamAlive, we have this penchant for aquatic animals that no one has heard of. And it will recommend a name for you that is a very weird colored aquatic animal. So in that all hands meeting, they had people who were electric green eels and yellow narwhals and blue dolphins giving their comments. So in those cases, it is anonymous. But if a company wanted, they could enforce a policy of, we will only authenticate users through our internal system. But the default that we recommend is to allow anonymity, where people could give their names if they wanted, but they don't have to. So that if you ask a question like, hey, what do you think of what we're doing? And people are free to answer without any fear of penalty. But that becomes a company policy, realistically, in terms of whether the company wants to enforce it or they want to embed it with some other authentication thing within their app saying you have to use our internal directory to put your actual name. By default, StreamAlive encourages aquatic animals as your names. Does that answer your question? You probably saw that in the
yes,
chat.
Right. And yes, you don't want to let it slip that you were salmon walrus, or that's what I just.
Yeah.
Oops. It was you. It was you who said the emperor is not wearing any clothes. Get him.
We were just talking about that in an event yesterday. Somebody was like, I thought it was supposed to be anonymous, but that's my feedback right there.
So true. Yeah. We've seen the extremes. We've seen companies go into the thing of we don't want to encourage any questions whatsoever. So we disable chat by default. And we've seen the other extreme. But I think it's really a function of culture and preferences and the domain, I guess.
All right. Very cool. Thank you so much for bringing this to share with us. We are technically at the end of the time we committed to. So I've put the links in the chat. If you would like to provide more feedback, and as you're thinking and whatnot, I want to make sure some of that gets to this team, the feedback form is there. We will post the recording for this one, probably faster than normal because I don't have to edit the breakouts out. All of the other things, so that, yay, sometimes it's lovely to be easy. And actually that's what I'm loving about this. I love how easy this is. So thank you for sharing it. I'm happy to leave this open if anybody has questions, or if you want to talk to anybody about that. But otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elise.